The sovereignty and goodness of God, together with the faithlessness of his promises displayed, being a narrative of the captivity and restoration of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson, commented by her to all that desires to know the Lord's doings to and dealings with her, especially to her dear children and relations. The second edition, corrected and amended. Written by her own hand for her private use, and now made public at the earnest desire of some friends, and for the benefit of the afflicted. Deuteronomy 32:39. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal. Neither is there any can deliver out of my hand. On the 10th of February 1675, came the Indians with great numbers upon Lancaster. Their first coming was about sunrising. Hearing the noise of some guns, we looked out. Several houses were burning, and the smoke ascending to heaven. There were 5 persons taken in one house. The father and the mother and a sucking child they knocked on the head. The other 2 they took and carried away alive. There were 2 others, who being out of their garrison upon some occasion were set upon. One was knocked on the head, the other escaped. Another there was who running along was shot and wounded, and fell down. He begged of them his life, promising them money, but they would not hearken to him, but knocked him in head, and stripped him naked, and split open his bowels. Another, seeing many of the Indians about his barn, ventured and went out, but was quickly shot down. There were 3 others belonging to the same garrison who were killed. The Indians getting up upon the roof of the barn had advantage to shoot down upon them over their fortification. Thus these murderous wretches went on, burning and destroying before them. At length they came and beset our own house, and quickly it was the dolefullest day that ever mine eyes saw. The house stood upon the edge of a hill. Some of the Indians got behind the hill, others into the barn, and others behind anything that could shelter them. From all which places they shot against the house, so that the bullets seemed to fly like hail, and quickly they wounded one man among us, then another, and then a third. About 2 hours, according to my observation, in that amazing time they had been about the house before they prevailed to fire it, which they did with flax and hemp which they brought out of the barn, and there being no defence about the house, only 2 flankers at 2 opposite corners, and one of them not finished. They fired it once, and one ventured out and quenched it, but they quickly fired it again, and that took. Now is the dreadful hour come, that I have often heard of, in time of war, as it was the case of others, but now mine eyes see it. Some in our house were fighting for their lives, others wallowing in their blood, the house on fire over our heads, and the bloody heathen ready to knock us on the head, if we stirred out. Now might we hear mothers and children crying out for themselves and one another, Lord, what shall we do? Then I took my children and one of my sisters to go forth and leave the house. But as soon as we came to the door and appeared, the Indians shot so thick that the bullets rattled against the house, as if one had taken an handful of stones and threw them, so that we were fain to give back. We had 6 stout dogs belonging to our garrison, but none of them would stir, though another time, if any Indian had come to the door, they were ready to fly upon him and tear him down. The Lord hereby would make us the more acknowledge his hand, and to see that our help is always in him. But out we must go, the fire increasing and coming along behind us roaring, and the Indians gaping before us with their guns, spears, and hatchets to devour us. No sooner were we out of the house, but my brother-in-law, being wounded in defending the house, fell down dead. Whereat the Indians scornfully shouted and hallowed, and were presently upon him, stripping off his clothes. The bullets flying thick, one went through my side, and the same, as would seem, through the bowels and hand of my dear child in my arms. One of my elder sister's children, named William, had then his leg broken, which the Indians perceiving, they knocked him on his head. Thus were we butchered by those merciless heathen, standing amazed, with the blood running down to our heels. My eldest sister being yet in the house, and seeing those woeful sights, the infidels hauling mothers one way, and children another, and some wallowing in their blood, and her elder son telling her that her son William was dead, and myself was wounded, she said, "And Lord, let me die with them," which was no sooner said, but she was struck with a bullet, and fell down dead over the threshold. I hope she is reaping the fruit of her good labours, being faithful to the service of God in her place. In her younger years she lay under much trouble upon spiritual accounts, till it pleased God to make that precious scripture take hold of her heart. And he said unto me, "My grace is sufficient for thee." More than 20 years after, I have heard her tell how sweet and comfortable that place was to her. But to return, the Indians laid hold of us, pulling me one way and the children another, and said, "Come, go along with us." I told them they would kill me. They answered if I were willing to go along with them, they would not hurt me. All the doleful sight that now was to behold at this house. Come, behold the works of the Lord, what desolations he has made in the earth. Of 37 persons who were in this one house, none escaped either present death or a bitter captivity, save only one, who might say as he, and I only am escaped alone to tell the news. There were 12 killed, some shot, some stabbed with their spears, some knocked down with their hatches. When we are in prosperity, oh, the little that we think of such dreadful sights, and to see our dear friends and relations lie bleeding out their heart blood upon the ground. There was one who was chopped into the head with a hatchet and stripped naked, and yet was crawling up and down. It is a solemn sight to see so many Christians lying in their blood, some here and some there, like a company of sheep torn by wolves, all of them stripped naked by a company of hellhounds, roaring, singing, ranting and insulting, as if they would have torn our very hearts out. Yet the Lord by his almighty power preserved a number of us from death, for there were 24 of us taken alive and carried captive. I had often before this said that if the Indians should come, I should choose rather to be killed by them than taken alive. But when it came to the trial, my mind changed. Their glittering weapons so daunted my spirit that I chose rather to go along with those, as I may say, ravenous beasts, than that moment to end my days. And that I may the better declare what happened to me during that grievous captivity, I shall particularly speak of the several removes we had up and down the wilderness. The first remove. Now away we must go with those barbarous creatures, with our bodies wounded and bleeding, and our hearts no less than our bodies. About a mile we went that night, up upon a hill within sight of the town, where they intended to lodge. There was hard by a vacant house which was deserted by the English before, for fear of the Indians. I asked them whether I might not lodge in the house that night, to which they answered, "What? Will you love Englishmen still?" This was the dolefullest night that ever my eyes saw. Oh, the roaring and singing and dancing and yelling of those black creatures in the night, which made the place a lively resemblance of hell. And as miserable was the waste that was there made of horses, cattle, sheep, swine, calves, lambs, roasting pigs, and fowl which they had plundered in the town, some roasting, some lying and burning, and some boiling to feed our merciless enemies, who were joyful enough though we were disconsolate. To add to the dolefulness of the former day and the dismalness of the present night, my thoughts ran upon my losses and sad bereaved condition. All was gone, my husband gone, at least separated from me, he being in the bay, and to add to my grief, the Indians told me they would kill him as he came homeward. My children gone, my relations and friends gone, our house and home, and all our comforts within door and without, all was gone, except my life, and I knew not but the next moment that might go too. There remained nothing to me but one poor wounded babe, and it seemed at present worse than death that it was in such a pitiful condition, bespeaking compassion, and I had no refreshing for it nor suitable things to revive it. Little do many think what is the savageness and brutishness of this barbarous enemy, even those that seem to profess more than others among them, when the English have fallen into their hands. Those 7 that were killed at Lancaster the summer before upon a Sabbath day, and the one that was afterward killed upon a weekday, were slain and mangled in a barbarous manner by One-Eyed John and Marlborough's praying Indians, which Captain Moseley brought to Boston, as the Indians told me. The second remove. But now, the next morning, I must turn my back upon the town, and travel with them into the vast and desolate wilderness, I knew not whither. It is not my tongue or pen can express the sorrows of my heart and bitterness of my spirit that I had at this departure, but God was with me in a wonderful manner, carrying me along and bearing up my spirit that it did not quite fail. One of the Indians carried my poor wounded babe upon a horse. It went moaning all along, "I shall die, I shall die." I went on foot after it, with sorrow that cannot be expressed. At length I took it off the horse, and carried it in my arms till my strength failed, and I fell down with it. Then they set me upon a horse with my wounded child in my lap, and there being no furniture upon the horse's back, as we were going down a steep hill, we both fell over the horse's head, at which they, like inhumane creatures, laughed and rejoiced to see it, though I thought we should there have ended our days, as overcome with so many difficulties. But the Lord renewed my strength still, and carried me along, that I might see more of his power, yes, so much that I could never have thought of, had I not experienced it. After this it quickly began to snow, and when night came on they stopped, and now down I must sit in the snow, by a little fire, and a few boughs behind me, with my sick child in my lap, and calling much for water, being now, through the wound, fallen into a violent fever. My own wound also growing so stiff that I could scarce sit down or rise up. Yet so it must be, that I must sit all this cold winter night upon the cold snowy ground, with my sick child in my arms, looking that every hour would be the last of its life, and having no Christian friend near me, either to comfort or help me. Oh, I may see the wonderful power of God, that my spirit did not utterly sink under my affliction. Still the Lord upheld me with his gracious and merciful spirit, and we were both alive to see the light of the next morning. The third remove. The morning being come, they prepared to go on their way. One of the Indians got up upon a horse, and they set me up behind him, with my poor sick babe in my lap. A very wearisome and tedious day I had of it, what with my own wound, and my child's being so exceeding sick, and in a lamentable condition with her wound. It may be easily judged what a poor feeble condition we were in, there being not the least crumb of refreshing that came within either of our mouths from Wednesday night to Saturday night, except only a little cold water. This day in the afternoon, about an hour by sun, we came to the place where they intended, namely an Indian town called Wenimesset, northward of Quaboag. When we were come, oh, the number of pagans, now merciless enemies, that there came about me, that I may say as David, I had fainted, unless I had believed, etc. The next day was the Sabbath. I then remembered how careless I had been of God's holy time, how many Sabbaths I had lost and misspent, and how everly I had walked in God's sight, which lay so close unto my spirit, that it was easy for me to see how righteous it was with God to cut off the thread of my life and cast me out of his presence forever. Yet the Lord still showed mercy to me and upheld me, and as he wounded me with one hand, so he healed me with the other. This day there came to me one Robert Pepper, a man belonging to Roxbury, who was taken in Captain Beers's fight, and had been now a considerable time with the Indians, and up with them almost as far as Albany, to see King Philip, as he told me, and was now very lately come into these parts. Hearing, I say, that I was in this Indian town, he obtained leave to come and see me. He told me he himself was wounded in the leg at Captain Beers's fight, and was not able some time to go, but as they carried him, and as he took oaken leaves and laid to his wound, and through the blessing of God, he was able to travel again. Then I took oaken leaves and laid to my side, and with the blessing of God it cured me also. Yet before the cure was wrought, I may say, as it is in Psalm 38, verse 5 through 6, my wounds stink and are corrupt, I am troubled, I am bowed down greatly, I go mourning all the day long. I sat much alone with a poor wounded child in my lap, which moaned night and day, having nothing to revive the body or cheer the spirits of her, but instead of that, sometimes one Indian would come and tell me, 1 hour, that your master will knock your child in the head, and then a second, and then a third, your master will quickly knock your child in the head. This was the comfort I had from them. Miserable comforters are ye all, as he said. Thus 9 days I sat upon my knees, with my babe in my lap, till my flesh was raw again. My child being even ready to depart this sorrowful world, they bade me carry it out to another wigwam, I suppose because they would not be troubled with such spectacles, whither I went with a very heavy heart, and down I sat with the picture of death in my lap. About 2 hours in the night, my sweet babe like a lamb departed this life on February 18, 1675, it being about 6 years and 5 months old. It was 9 days from the first wounding in this miserable condition, without any refreshing of one nature or other, except a little cold water. I cannot but take notice how at another time I could not bear to be in the room where any dead person was. But now the case is changed. I must and could lie down by my dead babe, side by side all the night after. I have thought since of the wonderful goodness of God to me in preserving me in the use of my reason and senses in that distressed time, that I did not use wicked and violent means to end my own miserable life. In the morning, when they understood that my child was dead, they sent for me home to my master's wigwam. By my master in this writing must be understood Quinapin, who was a Sagamore and married King Philip's wife's sister. Not that he first took me, but I was sold to him by another Narragansett Indian, who took me when first I came out of the garrison. I went to take up my dead child in my arms to carry it with me, but they bid me let it alone, there was no resisting, but go I must, and leave it. When I had been at my master's wigwam, I took the first opportunity I could get to go look after my dead child. When I came, I asked them what they had done with it. Then they told me it was upon the hill. Then they went and showed me where it was, where I saw the ground was newly digged, and there they told me they had buried it. There I left that child in the wilderness, and must commit it, and myself also in this wilderness condition, to him who is above all. God having taken away this dear child, I went to see my daughter Mary, who was at this same Indian town, at a wigwam not very far off, though we had little liberty or opportunity to see one another. She was about 10 years old, and taken from the door at first by a praying Indian, and afterwards sold for a gun. When I came in sight, she would fall a-weeping, at which they were provoked, and would not let me come near her, but bade me be gone, which was a heart-cutting word to me. I had one child dead, another in the wilderness, I knew not where, the third they would not let me come near to. Me, as he said, have ye bereave of my children, Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and ye will take Benjamin also, all these things are against me. I could not sit still in this condition, but kept walking from one place to another. And as I was going along, my heart was even overwhelmed with the thoughts of my condition, and that I should have children, and a nation which I knew not ruled over them. Whereupon I earnestly entreated the Lord that he would consider my low estate, and show me a token for good, and if it were his blessed will, some sign and hope of some relief. And indeed quickly the Lord answered in some measure my poor prayers, for as I was going up and down mourning and lamenting my condition, my son came to me and asked me how I did. I had not seen him before, since the destruction of the town, and I knew not where he was, till I was informed by himself that he was amongst a smaller parcel of Indians, whose place was about 6 miles off. With tears in his eyes, he asked me whether his sister Sarah was dead, and told me he had seen his sister Mary, and prayed me that I would not be troubled in reference to himself. The occasion of his coming to see me at this time was this. There was, as I said, about 6 miles from us, a small plantation of Indians, where it seems he had been during his captivity, and at this time there were some forces of the Indians gathered out of our company, and some also from them, among whom was my son's master, to go to assault and burn Medfield. In this time of the absence of his master, his dame brought him to see me. I took this to be some gracious answer to my earnest and unfeigned desire. The next day, namely to this, the Indians returned from Medfield, all the company, for those that belonged to the other small company, came through the town that now we were at. But before they came to us, all the outrageous roaring and whooping that there was, they began their din about a mile before they came to us. By their noise and whooping they signified how many they had destroyed, which was at that time 23. Those that were with us at home were gathered together as soon as they heard the whooping, and every time that the other went over their number, these at home gave a shout that the very earth rung again. And thus they continued till those that had been upon the expedition were come up to the Sagamore's wigwam, and then, oh, the hideous insulting and triumphing that there was over some Englishmen's scalps that they had taken, as their manner is, and brought with them. I cannot but take notice of the wonderful mercy of God to me in those afflictions, in sending me a Bible. One of the Indians that came from Medfield fight had brought some plunder, came to me, and asked me if I would have a Bible. He had got one in his basket. I was glad of it, and asked him whether he thought the Indians would let me read. He answered yes. So I took the Bible, and in that melancholy time it came into my mind to read first the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy, which I did, and when I had read it, my dark heart wrought on this manner, that there was no mercy for me, that the blessings were gone and the curses come in their room, and that I had lost my opportunity. But the Lord helped me still to go on reading till I came to chapter 30, the 7 first verses, where I found there was mercy promised again if we would return to him by repentance. And though we were scattered from one end of the earth to the other, yet the Lord would gather us together and turn all those curses upon our enemies. I do not desire to live to forget this scripture and what comfort it was to me. Now the Indians began to talk of removing from this place, some one way and some another. There were now, besides myself, 9 English captives in this place, all of them children, except one woman. I got an opportunity to go and take my leave of them. They being to go one way, and I another, I asked them whether they were earnest with God for deliverance. They told me they did as they were able, and it was some comfort to me that the Lord stirred up children to look to him. The woman, namely good wife Jocelyn, told me she should never see me again, and that she could find in her heart to run away. I wished her not to run away by any means, for we were near 30 miles from any English town, and she very big with child, and had but 1 week to reckon, and another child in her arms, 2 years old. And bad rivers there were to go over, and we were feeble, with our poor and coarse entertainment. I had my Bible with me. I pulled it out and asked her whether she would read. We opened the Bible and lighted on Psalm 27, in which psalm we especially took notice of the last verse, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord." The fourth remove. And now I must part with that little company I had. Here I parted from my daughter Mary, whom I never saw again till I saw her in Dorchester, returned from captivity, and from 4 little cousins and neighbours, some of which I never saw afterward. The Lord only knows the end of them. Amongst them also was that poor woman before mentioned, who came to a sad end. As some of the company told me in my travel, she having much grief upon her spirit about her miserable condition, being so near her time, she would be often asking the Indians to let her go home, they not being willing to that, and yet, vexed with her importunity, gathered a great company together about her, and stripped her naked, and set her in the midst of them, and when they had sung and danced about her their hellish manner, as long as they pleased, they knocked her on head, and the child in her arms with her. When they had done that, they made a fire and put them both into it, and told the other children that were with them that if they attempted to go home, they would serve them in like manner. The children said she did not shed 1 tear, but prayed all the while. But to return to my own journey, we travelled about half a day or little more, and came to a desolate place in the wilderness, where there were no wigwams or inhabitants before. We came about the middle of the afternoon to this place, cold and wet and snowy and hungry and weary, and no refreshing for man but the cold ground to sit on and our poor Indian cheer. Heart-aching thoughts here I had about my poor children, who were scattered up and down among the wild beasts of the forest. My head was light and dizzy, either through hunger or hard lodging, or trouble, or altogether, my knees feeble, my body raw by sitting double night and day, that I cannot express to man the affliction that lay upon my spirit. But the Lord helped me at that time to express it to himself. I opened my Bible to read, and the Lord brought that precious scripture to me. Thus saith the Lord, refrain thy voice from weeping and thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded, and they shall come again from the land of the enemy. This was a sweet cordial to me when I was ready to faint. Many and many a time have I sat down and wept sweetly over this scripture. At this place we continued about 4 days. The fifth remove. The occasion, as I thought of their moving at this time, was the English army, it being near and following them. For they went as if they had gone for their lives, for some considerable way, and then they made a stop, and chose some of their stoutest men, and sent them back to hold the English army in play, whilst the rest escaped. And then, like Jehu, they marched on furiously with their old and with their young. Some carried their old decrepit mothers, some carried one, and some another. 4 of them carried a great Indian upon a bier, but going through a thick wood with him, they were hindered and could make no haste, whereon they took him upon their backs and carried him, one at a time, till they came to Banquag River. Upon a Friday, a little after noon, we came to this river. When all the company was come up, and were gathered together, I thought to count the number of them, but they were so many, and being somewhat in motion, it was beyond my skill. In this travel, because of my wound, I was somewhat favoured in my load. I carried only my knitting work and 2 quarts of parched meal. Being very faint, I asked my mistress to give me 1 spoonful of the meal, but she would not give me a taste. They quickly fell to cutting dry trees, to make rafts to carry them over the river, and soon my turn came to go over. By the advantage of some brush which they had laid upon the raft to sit upon, I did not wet my foot, which many of themselves at the other end were mid-leg deep, which cannot but be acknowledged as a favour of God to my weakened body, it being a very cold time. I was not before acquainted with such kind of doings or dangers. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee. Isaiah 43, verse 2. A certain number of us got over the river that night, but it was the night after the Sabbath before all the company was got over. On the Saturday they boiled an old horse's leg which they had got, and so we drank of the broth, as soon as they thought it was ready, and when it was almost all gone, they filled it up again. The first week of my being among them, I hardly ate anything. The second week I found my stomach grow very faint for want of something, and yet it was very hard to get down their filthy trash. But the third week, though I could think how formerly my stomach would turn against this or that, and I could starve and die before I could eat such things, yet they were sweet and savoury to my taste. I was at this time knitting a pair of white cotton stockings for my mistress, and had not yet wrought upon a Sabbath day. When the Sabbath came, they bade me go to work. I told them it was the Sabbath day, and desired them to let me rest, and told them I would do as much more tomorrow, to which they answered me they would break my face. And here I cannot but take notice of the strange providence of God in preserving the heathen. They were many hundreds, old and young, some sick and some lame. Many had papooses at their backs. The greatest number at this time with us were squaws, and they travelled with all they had, bag and baggage, and yet they got over this river. And on Monday they set their wigwams on fire, and away they went. On that very day came the English army after them to this river, and saw the smoke of their wigwams, and yet this river put a stop to them. God did not give them courage or activity to go over after us. We were not ready for so great a mercy as victory and deliverance. If we had been, God would have found out a way for the English to have passed this river, as well as for the Indians with their squaws and children, and all their luggage. Oh, that my people had hearkened to me, and Israel had walked in my ways, I should soon have subdued their enemies, and turned my hand against their adversaries. Psalm 81, 13-14. And the 6th remove. On Monday, as I said, they set their wigwams on fire and went away. It was a cold morning, and before us there was a great brook with ice on it. Some waded through it up to the knees and higher, but others went till they came to a beaver dam, and I amongst them, where through the good providence of God I did not wet my foot. I went along that day mourning and lamenting, leaving farther my own country, and travelling into a vast and howling wilderness, and I understood something of Lot's wife's temptation when she looked back. We came that day to a great swamp, by the side of which we took up our lodging that night. When I came to the brow of the hill that looked toward the swamp, I thought we had been come to a great Indian town, though there were none but our own company. The Indians were as thick as the trees. It seemed as if there had been 1,000 hatchets going at once. If one looked before one, there was nothing but Indians, and behind one, nothing but Indians, and so on either hand. I myself in the midst, and no Christian soul near me, and yet how had the Lord preserved me in safety? Oh, the experience that I have had of the goodness of God to me and mine. The 7th remove. After a restless and hungry night there, we had a wearisome time of it the next day. The swamp by which we lay was, as it were, a deep dungeon, and an exceeding high and steep hill before it. Before I got to the top of the hill, I thought my heart and legs and all would have broken and failed me. What through faintness and soldures of body, it was a grievous day of travel to me. As we went along, I saw a place where English cattle had been. That was comfort to me, such as it was. Quickly after that we came to an English path, which so took with me that I thought I could have freely lain down and died. That day, a little after noon, we came to Squakeg, where the Indians quickly spread themselves over the deserted English fields, gleaning what they could find. Some picked up ears of wheat that were crickled down, some found ears of Indian corn, some found ground nuts, and others sheaves of wheat that were frozen together in the shock and went to threshing of them out. Myself got 2 ears of Indian corn, and whilst I did but turn my back, one of them was stolen from me, which much troubled me. There came an Indian to them at that time with a basket of horse liver. I asked him to give me a piece. "What," says he, "can you eat horse liver?" I told him I would try, if he would give a piece, which he did, and I laid it on the coals to roast. But before it was half ready, they got half of it away from me, so that I was fain to take the rest and eat it as it was, with the blood about my mouth, and yet a savoury bit it was to me. For to the hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. A solemn sight, methought it was, to see fields of wheat and Indian corn forsaken and spoiled, and the remainders of them to be food for our merciless enemies. That night we had a mess of wheat for our supper. The 8th remove. On the morrow morning we must go over the river, that is Connecticut, to meet with King Philip. 2 canoes full they had carried over. The next turn I myself was to go. But as my foot was upon the canoe to step in, there was a sudden outcry among them, and I must step back, and instead of going over the river, I must go 4 or 5 miles up the river farther northward. Some of the Indians ran one way, and some another. The cause of this rout was, as I thought, their espying some English scouts who were thereabout. In this travel up the river about noon the company made a stop and sat down, some to eat and others to rest them. As I sat amongst them, musing of things past, my son Joseph unexpectedly came to me. We asked of each other's welfare, bemoaning our doleful condition and the change that had come upon us. We had husband and father, and children and sisters, and friends and relations, and house and home, and many comforts of this life. But now we may say, as Job, "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return." The Lord gave, the Lord have taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I asked him whether he would read. He told me he earnestly desired it. I gave him my Bible, and he lighted upon that comfortable scripture. I shall not die but live, and declare the works of the Lord. The Lord have chastened me sore, yet he have not given me over to death. Look here, mother, says he. Did you read this? And here I may take occasion to mention one principal ground of my setting forth these lines. Even as the psalmist says, to declare the works of the Lord, and his wonderful power in carrying us along, preserving us in the wilderness, while under the enemy's hand, and returning of us in safety again. And his goodness in bringing to my hand so many comfortable and suitable scriptures in my distress. But to return we travelled on till night, and in the morning we must go over the river to Philip's crew. When I was in the canoe, I could not but be amazed at the numerous crew of pagans that were on the bank on the other side. When I came ashore, they gathered all about me, I sitting alone in the midst. I observed they asked one another questions. and laughed and rejoiced over their gains and victories. Then my heart began to fail, and I fell a-weeping, which was the first time to my remembrance that I wept before them. Although I had met with so much affliction, and my heart was many times ready to break, yet could I not shed one tear in their sight, but rather had been all this while in amaze, and like one astonished. But now I may say, as Psalm 137, verse 1, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sate down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. There, one of them asked me why I wept. I could hardly tell what to say, yet I answered, they would kill me. No, said he, none will hurt you. Then came one of them and gave me 2 spoonfuls of meal to comfort me, and another gave me half a pint of peas, which was more worth than many bushels at another time. Then I went to see King Philip. He bade me come in and sit down, and asked me whether I would smoke it. A usual compliment nowadays amongst saints and sinners, but this no way suited me. For though I had formerly used tobacco, yet I had left it ever since I was first taken. It seems to be a bait the devil lays to make men lose their precious time. I remember with shame how formerly, when I had taken 2 or 3 pipes, I was presently ready for another. Such a bewitching thing it is. But I thank God, he has now given me power over it. Surely there are many who may be better employed than to lie sucking a stinking tobacco pipe. Now the Indians gather their forces to go against Northampton. Overnight one went about yelling and hooting to give notice of the design, whereupon they fell to boiling of groundnuts and parching of corn, as many as had it, for their provision, and in the morning away they went. During my abode in this place, Philip spake to me to make a shirt for his boy, which I did, for which he gave me 1 shilling. I offered the money to my master, but he bade me keep it, and with it I bought a piece of horseflesh. Afterwards he asked me to make a cap for his boy, for which he invited me to dinner. I went, and he gave me a pancake, about as big as 2 fingers. It was made of parched wheat, beaten and fried in bear's grease. But I thought I never tasted pleasanter meat in my life. There was a squaw who spake to me to make a shirt for her sannup, for which she gave me a piece of bear. Another asked me to knit a pair of stockings, for which she gave me a quart of peas. I boiled my peas and bear together, and invited my master and mistress to dinner. But the proud gossip, because I served them both in one dish, would eat nothing, except 1 bit that he gave her upon the point of his knife. Hearing that my son was come to this place, I went to see him, and found him lying flat upon the ground. I asked him how he could sleep so. He answered me that he was not asleep, but at prayer, and lay so, that they might not observe what he was doing. I pray God he may remember these things now he is returned in safety. At this place, the sun now getting higher, what with the beams and heat of the sun, and the smoke of the wigwams, I thought I should have been blind. I could scarce discern one wigwam from another. There was here one Mary Thurston of Medfield, who, seeing how it was with me, lent me a hat to wear. But as soon as I was gone, the squaw, who owned that Mary Thurston, came running after me and got it away again. Here was the squaw that gave me 1 spoonful of meal. I put it in my pocket to keep it safe. Yet notwithstanding, somebody stole it, but put 5 Indian corns in the room of it, which corns were the greatest provisions I had in my travel for 1 day. The Indians, returning from Northampton, brought with them some horses and sheep and other things which they had taken. I desired them that they would carry me to Albany upon one of those horses and sell me for powder, for so they had sometimes discoursed. I was utterly hopeless of getting home on foot the way that I came. I could hardly bear to think of the many weary steps I had taken to come to this place. The 9th remove. But instead of going either to Albany or homeward, we must go 5 miles up the river and then go over it. Here we abode a while. Here lived a sorry Indian who spoke to me to make him a shirt. When I had done it, he would pay me nothing. But he living by the riverside, where I often went to fetch water, I would often be putting of him in mind, and calling for my pay. At last he told me if I would make another shirt for a papoose not yet born, he would give me a knife, which he did when I had done it. I carried the knife in, and my master asked me to give it to him, and I was not a little glad that I had anything that they would accept of and be pleased with. When we were at this place, my master's maid came home. She had been gone 3 weeks into the Narragansett country to fetch corn, where they had stored up some in the ground. She brought home about a peck and half of corn. This was about the time that their great captain Nyananto was killed in the Narragansett country. My son being now about a mile from me, I asked liberty to go and see him. They bade me go, and away I went, but quickly lost myself, travelling over hills and through swamps, and could not find the way to him. And I cannot but admire at the wonderful power and goodness of God to me, in that though I was gone from home, and met with all sorts of Indians, and those I had no knowledge of, and there being no Christian soul near me, yet not one of them offered the least imaginable miscarriage to me. I turned homeward again, and met with my master. And I cannot but admire at the wonderful power and goodness of God to me, in that, though I was gone from home, and met with all sorts of Indians, and those I had no knowledge of, and there being no Christian soul near me, yet not one of them offered the least imaginable miscarriage to me. I turned homeward again, and met with my master, and my spirit was ready to sink with the thoughts of my poor children. My son was ill, and I could not but think of his mournful looks, and no Christian friend was near him to do any office of love for him, either for soul or body. And my poor girl, I knew not where she was, nor whether she was sick, or well, or alive, or dead. I repaired under these thoughts to my Bible, my great comfort in that time, and that scripture came to my hand. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. Psalm 55, verse 22. But I was fain to go and look after something to satisfy my hunger, and going among the wigwams, I went into one, and there found a squaw who showed herself very kind to me, and gave me a piece of bear. I put it into my pocket, and came home, but could not find an opportunity to broil it, for fear they would get it from me, and there it lay all that day and night in my stinking pocket. In the morning I went to the same squaw, who had a kettle of ground nuts boiling. I asked her to let me boil my piece of bear in her kettle, which she did, and gave me some ground nuts to eat with it. And I cannot but think how pleasant it was to me. I have sometimes seen bear baked very handsomely among the English, and some like it, but the thought that it was bear made me tremble. But now that was savoury to me, that one would think was enough to turn the stomach of a brute creature. One bitter cold day I could find no room to sit down before the fire. I went out, and could not tell what to do, but I went into another wigwam, where they were also sitting round the fire, but the squaw laid a skin for me, and bid me sit down, and gave me some ground nuts, and bade me come again, and told me they would buy me, if they were able, and yet these were strangers to me that I never saw before. The 10th remove. That day a small part of the company removed about 3/4 of a mile, intending further the next day. When they came to the place where they intended to lodge, and had pitched the wigwams, being hungry, I went again back to the place we were before at, to get something to eat, being encouraged by the squaw's kindness, who bade me come again. When I was there came an Indian to look after me, who, when he had found me, kicked me all along. I went home and found venison roasting that night, but they would not give me one bit of it. Sometimes I met with favour, and sometimes with nothing but frowns. The 11th remove. The next day in the morning they took their travel, intending a day's journey up the river. I took my load at my back, and quickly we came to wade over the river, and passed over tiresome and wearisome hills. One hill was so steep that I was fain to creep up upon my knees and to hold by the twigs and bushes to keep myself from falling backward. My head also was so light that I usually reeled as I went. But I hope all these wearisome steps that I have taken are but a forewarning to me of the heavenly rest. I know, O Lord, that thy judgments are right, and that thou in faithlessness hast afflicted me. The 12th remove. It was upon a Sabbath day morning that they prepared for their travel. This morning I asked my master whether he would sell me to my husband. He answered me nux, which did much rejoice my spirit. My mistress, before we went, was gone to the burial of a papoose, and returning she found me sitting and reading in my Bible. She snatched it hastily out of my hand and threw it out of doors. I ran out and catched it up and put it into my pocket and never let her see it afterward. Then they packed up their things to be gone and gave me my load. I complained it was too heavy, whereupon she gave me a slap in the face and bade me go. I lifted up my heart to God, hoping the redemption was not far off, and rather because their insolency grew worse and worse. But the thoughts of my going homeward, for so we bent our course, much cheered my spirit and made my burden seem light and almost nothing at all. But, to my amazement and great perplexity, the scale was soon turned. For when we had gone a little way, on a sudden my mistress gives out. She would go no further but turn back again, and said I must go back again with her, and she called her Sanop, and would have had him gone back also, but he would not, but said he would go on, and come to us again in 3 days. My spirit was, upon this I confess, very impatient, and almost outrageous. I thought I could as well have died as went back. I cannot declare the trouble that I was in about it, but yet back again I must go. As soon as I had the opportunity, I took my Bible to read, and that quieting scripture came to my hand, "Be still, and know that I am God," which stilled my spirit for the present. But a sore time of trial, I concluded I had to go through, my master being gone, who seemed to me the best friend that I had of an Indian, both in cold and hunger, and quickly so it proved. Down I sat, with my heart as full as it could hold, and yet so hungry that I could not sit neither. But going out to see what I could find, and walking among the trees, I found 6 acorns and 2 chestnuts, which were some refreshment to me. Towards night I gathered some sticks for my own comfort, that I might not lie a cold. But when we came to lie down, they bade me to go out and lie somewhere else, for they had company, they said, come in more than their own. I told them I could not tell where to go. They bade me go look. I told them if I went to another wigwam they would be angry and send me home again. Then one of the company drew his sword and told me he would run me through if I did not go presently. Then was I fain to stoop to this rude fellow, and to go out in the night, I knew not whither. Mine eyes have seen that fellow afterwards walking up and down Boston under the appearance of a friend Indian, and several others of the like cut. I went to one wigwam, and they told me they had no room. Then I went to another, and they said the same. At last an old Indian bade me to come to him, and his squaw gave me some ground nuts. She gave me also something to lay under my head, and a good fire we had. And through the good providence of God, I had a comfortable lodging that night. In the morning, another Indian bade me come at night, and he would give me 6 groundnuts, which I did. We were at this place and time about 2 miles from the Connecticut River. We went in the morning to gather groundnuts, to the river, and went back again that night. I went with a good load at my back, for they, when they went though but a little way, would carry all their trumpery with them. I told them the skin was off my back, but I had no other comforting answer from them than this, that it would be no matter if my head were off too.